Hello everybody and welcome to Let's Play Guild Wars 2. So earlier on, as you can see here, the people that we were with at the end of the last video are gone sadly. And yeah, it didn't cross my mind that they could have been doing anything dodgy, and yeah, I got comments about that as soon as the video went up. So thanks for putting that in my mind, guys. Yeah, that was really brilliant. So this is actually post-commentary. I got in game earlier and I thought, right, okay, I'm going to level up a bit. I'll try and do kind of a highlightsy type thing. Some of you have said, no, we want to see all of the actual leveling up side of things and stuff too. And I just thought, we'll see how it goes. And then after maybe 10-15 minutes, like, totally regret it. So, yeah, but we'll keep all the footage in and I'll just do post-commentary here. But yeah, that's the dam I was talking about in a previous video. Just out in the distance there. Later on, we'll go closer over to the dam. But I was really regretting doing this post, really, because we came across a lot of things that just would have been cool to do live, really. They really would have been better if I'd just been talking about them as they happened. But then again, at the same time, this will keep the pace up because I ramble, as you might know, I ramble quite a lot. And honestly, I could have been spent like twice as long doing what I did in this short video here, or as short as you can really call it. I would have spent twice as long if I was doing live commentary. I really would have. So, in any case, this is me running around. Essentially, there's a section of Queensdale. Do you remember the other episode? I was talking about how they kind of made Guild Wars 2 a section of Queensdale in Guild Wars 1. I have reason to believe this is kind of the section that exists in Guild Wars 1, and that's what we're playing today. Anyway, speak to this woman, Cassie, who says, my poor husband, all he ever dreamed of was running his own mower farm, but we've hardly had a moment's peace. We say, what kind of trouble? And she says, bandits. They're terribly fond of Meppy and my mowers. They're prize birds. Unfortunately, the bandits never pay for what they take. Well, where do they come from, we ask? He says, oh, straight down south. There's a cave there they've set up camp in, way too close to my farm, if you ask me. And so there's a couple of people that run this ranch here, this little place in Queensdale. There's Cassie, and then there's Meppy, and then there's this other grumpy sod here I'm about to speak to, Wrangler Todor, who says it's kind of daunting to look out for mowers and realise how many lives we're responsible for. We say, yeah, that's very impressive, you're amazing. He says, well, thank you, though I admit I'm not very devoted to the way Meppy and Cassie are. It's my job, though, and I don't mind it at all. And then we say, well, you must really love them. He says, bah, these things have a temper as foul as their stink. I care for them, but I don't love them the way the other two do. It's what I know, so I guess I'll just keep doing it, which is maybe a different side of the mowers that I never really expected before. I always thought they were very lovable animals, but that guy really doesn't like him. Here's Meppy himself, who I thought was a girl, judging from her name. He says, afternoon, welcome to me and Cassie's mower ranch. It's only fair to warn you, we've had a lot of trouble with bandits lately. They've been hiding out in the cave south of here, so be careful. I asked him about whether he's worried about the bandits. He explained this is a mower ranch, and I was really scared he was going to give me the exact same dialogue as Cassie did earlier, but it is actually slightly different, though you get essentially the same information. Cassie is my darling wife. This place would fall apart in a heartbeat without her. He says the bandits are a bunch of thieves and murderers. There's a cave south of here that's full of them. I wish someone would go in there and teach them a lesson. Bandits are really, and what we'll do now is we'll go in the cave. Bandits are... they're not very interesting, really, sadly, and they kind of dominate a lot of what the early personal story and explorable stuff is as a human. Like an awful lot of it is bandits. You will have already noticed that for the short amount of personal story we've already done. It's just bandits, 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 bandits. And considering there's such a large part of the story now, it is a bit of a shame. I feel like there's not too much to them. Before the game out, we heard an awful lot about the way Kreiter's run. I mentioned before this kind of push-pull between the Ministry Guard and the Seraph, these two forces of police essentially for Kreiter. There's a lot of interesting stuff there, and a lot of stories were written about the way that Kreiter is in a little bit of trouble and they're always overlapping with one another. And we had a story about a minister essentially that died in Divinity's Reach, and Logan Thackeray, this guy we've been hearing about and we met last episode, decides, right, okay, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to try and sort this out. But then there's another woman, Commander Serentine, who's kind of the Ministry Guard, and she's stepping forward and she's saying, oh no, this isn't anything to do with you. And where there's so much interesting stuff like that they could be talking about, I think it's a little bit of a shame, really, that we just have a bunch of stuff about the bandits here, and it's just, oh, okay, we've got the bandits. It's like, alright, well, what do the bandits want? I mean, we'll be seeing a Char kind of story stuff in, I don't know, maybe a few episodes' time, and you'll see their main opposing faction straight away is really kind of interesting. It's got a lot of story and stuff behind them, mainly because it had a lot to do with what was going on in Guild Wars 1 as well as Guild Wars 2. And bandits were in Guild Wars 1, but they weren't anything major. Bandits were just kind of generic enemies you fought early on in pre-searing, and ArenaNet never really went back to just bandits as being an enemy. They kind of moved past that, and you fought a lot of humans throughout the story of the first game, don't get me wrong, but they always had a real reason to be fighting you, and quite often they were like of an opposing nation, or they had completely different motives. These are just people harassing everyone, and you know, they have their place. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to complain too much. I do think they've got their place in the game, but still, It's just like, okay, they're bandits. Anyway, so for this heart, you'll see I've been slowly progressing through it. This is quite a nice heart for me, I think, because it demonstrates a fair few different things you can do. First of all, there's quite a few events to do with the bandits actually disrupting and tampering with these mowers. For example, the cave we're currently in, you can find an event where there's loads of mowers that have been tied up and bound in here and you get to free them. But also this event shows you that you can destroy stuff to get progress, and it also shows you that environmental weapons, these things that we're picking up as we go around the world, also have a role to play in the heart. Like here, we're picking up these bombs and placing them next to the bandit supplies to blow them up. And it even has another mechanic as well, actually, to do with this, where, can you see these food stacks? I picked a couple of them up. If you look on the bottom right-hand corner of my screen, it shows items as they go into my inventory. By default, by the way, this will just come up in like a little window that you then accept, and then more items will appear in your inventory afterwards. But I've set up something called auto loot, so you can just press F, and I would recommend anyone playing the game to do the same. Before the game came out, I kind of was like, I don't really want to do that. I want to know what items are going in my inventory. But it's just as easy to see what items are going in when you've got auto loot on than when you don't. It's just less clicks, which is quite nice. But in any case, you can see I'm grabbing this stolen food. This is another thing you can do for a lot of hearts in this game. You can grab certain items and actually return them to the person who offers the heart quest, if you will, and you can give it to those people for extra progress. And never forget about that. I say that's a big hint, a good thing you can do while you're playing this game, because otherwise you can end up needlessly using up effort, because you'll pick up all of these items that you could get extra progress for, but instead you'll just keep grinding on enemies to finish hearts when you could just automatically finish, as you'll see I do here. I give Cassie the stuff. I say, I found this in the caves. Is it yours? And she says, yes, that's Meppy's own special mower feed. He'll be thrilled. And that finished the heart for me. So do bear that in mind. And the other thing is that gets it out of your inventory. Otherwise, it will just be clutter that sits around in there. So we get a message from her. With enemies like you, Natalie Pinecove, those bandits will think twice before trying to bother our little mower again. My dear Meppy and I might just get a little piece. Thanks for showing. We're not such easy targets after all.
Good to meet you.
And we can speak to her for some items. Again, I do a couple of hearts in this video, and in truth, I don't actually read all of the dialogue from them. I'll probably do that at the start of the next episode, because I didn't like anticipating how long it will take me to read it afterwards instead of just doing it at the time. As you can see there, we still don't really have enough karma to get anything, but I did sell some junk out of my inventory, and I start messing around with things. So you get different inventory slots, and here you can see as I've been playing, I've got a couple of bags which I've equipped, which increases the capacity of your inventory. Also, while you play the game, you get what I'm opening here, bags of pinched goods, and those things will drop materials that you can use in crafting, and they could just clutter your inventory, and you might think that's really annoying, but as you can see here, I'm clicking this cog, and you can click deposit all collectibles, and that'll throw it all into your bank for when you eventually do want to go and craft, and you can just craft all the stuff straight then. So very handy. I would recommend to anyone to do that as best you possibly can. Even if you're not planning on crafting, just keep depositing that stuff, because it will slowly build up in your bank, and you can sell it later on, which will be nice. Another thing I do there as well is there's another type of item in Guild Wars 2 that allows you to, here I am equipping a logging axe, by the way, but there's another type of item in Guild Wars 2 called a salvage item. And these you can use salvage kits on. As you've seen, I've had the option to buy a fair few times, and I've got as rewards. You can use these salvage kits to get, yet again, more crafting materials. And then I kind of started thinking, well, what else do I want to do? What else have I got in my inventory? And I did notice I've got a bow. And the way the skill system works, as you probably know, is that your skills are determined by the weapon you're wielding. And I equipped the bow. I was like, should we do that? But I think that might be more fun to do next episode again, while I'm actually doing live commentary, and we unlock the skills for that. So I went back to the axe and warhorn, and kind of left it at that. I've sold, as you can see here now, I'm selling all of my other stuff in the inventory. We've now got 3 silver, which is like loads of money, actually. Well, it's not loads of money, but it seems weird to me that you get into silver so quickly. I'm level 4 and we're already dealing with silver. I would have expected it to be like, or the way I would have done it would have been like, you don't really start dealing with silver amounts of money until you're like level 10 plus or so, just so that it feels like there's a longer progression until you start reaching gold and so forth. In any case, that's just a very minor thing. But yeah, so we've now got a fair few silver, and we can start buying stuff that doesn't cost karma, which will be quite nice. And yeah, next video we'll have a look at using the bow, but honestly I'm really enjoying the axe at the moment. The axe and warhorn, damn, it's doing a lot of damage, a lot more damage than I found myself doing as an elementalist, I'll say that much. Now, as an Ellie, I was admittedly in a lot of the Asura areas, so balance might have been slightly different because I was fighting different enemies and stuff. It was a totally different area of the world, but still, I'm really laying the smack down on a lot of these spiders, a lot more than I thought I would. Honestly, my impression of the Ranger going into this LP, and it still is kind of like that, it was that Rangers couldn't really do that much. I mean, I fought a lot in World versus World, and I've seen played around a lot of them, and you know, you get to see them as you play the game, but I just never really kind of noticed they were doing anything particularly amazing or outstanding, or that they really filled one role in the game really well. Like, they're not particularly supporty like Guardians. They don't have particularly high DPS, or so I thought, like, you know, Thieves might, but they're not necessarily really glass cannon either. I just kind of thought they exist. If anyone had asked me, alright, wooden potatoes, what is like the jack of all trades class, I would have either said warrior or ranger. I might have been more inclined to say ranger though, because it's like, in my opinion, before starting playing this, again, my opinion might change, was that they were a bit of a jack of all trades, but they got a pet too, which kind of made things a little bit more spicy and a little bit more interesting, because you've got all the ways that your skills will play out of how your pet reacts and stuff. But we'll see how my impressions go. I'm really enjoying it at the moment though. It is only starter zone, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, here you can see I'm at an orchard here. This is another heart quest, as you can see up in the top right hand corner, and I've not spoken to the heart person yet, and yet we're over halfway complete, right? I also just got a Spider Slayer achievement down there for killing 10 spiders. That can be a problem. This is something I found happen a lot to me while I was playing the game. So we speak to the people now, and Paris says, "Don't worry about Ida. She's trying to run this orchard while she's grieving for her husband." She says, "Do you like it? The apples we harvest here make for delicious pies. My husband used to harvest the apples before he passed away." And we say, "Well, do you need any help? Shall we fill the role of your husband?" "Without my husband, I need more help than ever. The orchard is infested with spiders and they're starting to build nests. I need to get rid of them, but I can't do it on my own." So we ask, "Well, what happened to your husband?" Which obviously would be a bit of a sore subject. Oh yeah, and this guy starts talking too. But it's a bit of a sore subject. We say, "Well, what happened?" "He was taking a shipment of apples to Beetleton. Then the centaurs attacked. Now I just have my orchard." So yeah, very kind of a bit of a sad story. I quite like this about the humans. The idea is they're supposed to be on a bit of a back foot. And it's quite funny because you hear, oh, they're on the back foot, and then the first thing you see is this massive grand city, Divinity's Reach, and everything seems pretty happy, and they're fighting other humans, which isn't exactly a sign that the race is on a back foot, but then they do kind of litter in throughout these kind of stories about people who have lost loved ones, and she in particular talks about the centaurs who we first experienced while we were playing Guild Wars 2, and actually kind of serve the role as bandits in a few levels time. Basically they're like the new bandits after a bit. So yeah, I'm kind of interested to speak to her, but back to my original point, you can very easily finish heart quests. Look at how close I am to finishing this right now without ever speaking to the NPC, and that does mean that you can miss dialogue and stuff. Now, it's not the end of the world if you miss dialogue. Honestly, it's not, because a lot of the time they don't have amazing stuff to say. They really don't. They're not going to teach you about some of the deepest mysteries of the universe, but it can happen, and I will be making a concerted effort to at least speak to them before I finish stuff. Also, funnily enough, so here she's got totally different dialogue, as you can see. She says, "Do you like it, the apples we harvest?" And we can say, "Ah, do you have a pie? Do you have any?" And you can actually buy some if you want. You can even buy a recipe for crafting, this cooking recipe, to make your own pies, or you can just buy them straight off of it's only 14 karma. We've got 55 at this point, so I figured, why not? I'll buy some. I did talk to you about food already before, so by actually consuming this, we'll give ourselves a buff, which is plus 20 healing power, which will make our heal skill do a bit more, basically, for the purposes of this build right now. And also, it'll mean we get a little bit more experience for killing stuff, which is always handy in the early levels, and in the later levels too. A lot of the time they say plus 10 experience, but it means plus 10% more experience, so don't fall into the trap, because I fell in, like, in the level 30s or so. I was like, oh, what's the point in me getting any of this food? Plus 10 experience doesn't mean anything to me. But then I, like, killed something and got, with the buff on, but got less than 10 experience from it. I was like, how is that working? And realised it's a percentage. So yeah, that's quite nice to actually bear in mind, and always handy, really, if you can, especially if you're on a second character. Just stock up on consumables, and just, in my opinion, just play with consumables. Some consumables have like a level requirement, so you can't do it with all of them, but it is a nice tip, at least. Anyway, so yeah, I finished the heart, and remember what I said about how hearts are supposed to guide you to areas to complete dynamic events? But I actually finished the heart, and then the event started, quite funnily enough, so that's a bit of a shame. But this event has triggered something new for us to do here, and now we can actually hit the trees, we can grab the apples that fall from them, or as you'll see with this tree here, spiders fall down. And you don't get any apples, but if you kill the spiders that then do drop, you then get apples from them, so you can always get apples, and then you can hand the apples in to help her make some of her famous pies, which is quite nice. And you'll see me do something here as well that I kind of recommend. I never thought I'd end up doing it, but it is kind of interesting. We say, here, take all the apples, and can you see the bar in the top right went up, and it says I've now contributed 12. Now, I haven't finished the event, but I'm leaving. I'm not going to keep going with that, because I know I've contributed 12. I know I've done enough now to get maximum reward from that, I can just let other players in the areas finish the event and I'll still get the reward. Now that's something you can do. Usually while I'm playing the game, I wouldn't do it that much. I do it here because I want to keep, you know, the video less or around 20 minutes or so. But that is something you can do and something you can bear in mind if you're like a min-maxer and you only really care about being totally efficient. But yeah, we're not really missing out on anything. You'll just see later I get the ding for the event being complete, and that's about it. So yeah, we leave that area. I missed that waypoint that's right next to it, which is kind of stupid of me, but it doesn't really matter. And we come over to the dam. One thing I really wanted in Guild Wars 2 was, in the first game, okay, you had the big world map, and you had loads of stuff that was on there, but you can go everywhere on the map. And there were a few places on that map in particular, especially when Eye of the North came out and made the map look even bigger and showed us even more areas we can go to. I really wanted to go and swim in those 2 lakes I mentioned before, the Giant's Basin. And also, there was another lake to the northwest above the Maguma jungle, which I really wanted to swim in there as well for Guild Wars 2. And when I heard we could swim and that we would be interior again, so there you go. I just got completion for the event, and that leveled me up to level 5 too, which is awesome. So I was like, oh, I really want to swim in them, and I was really looking forward to that for Guild Wars 2. Sadly, you can't do it in this game. You really, and this dam is the closest we really get, almost the closest we get to actually swimming in it, which is a shame. As I said, there is another dam in a slightly higher level area, which we'll get to in time. But yeah, so this was a really interesting experience for me when it wasn't in game. This was when I was at the Eurogamer convention last year. Was it last year or was it the year before? When I got to play it before the game was out, I kind of came here, and it was a little bit saddening really that we couldn't go in. There is a dungeon, Caudicus's Manor, which I'll talk about lots when we get to that point in the story, but in that manor it turns out you can kind of swim in one of the Giant's Basins or in the water around Divinity's Reach, but you can't ever really go further than that. So yeah, this is the big dam that that woman said she was worried was going to fall. This is also a dynamic event here to kill a very big earth elemental, which again will help us with the heart. This is the way things are supposed to happen really. We're guided to this area because there's a heart here, and what do you know, there's an event here too, which is where it was meant to be. Also, you can pick up these boulders in the area and throw them at people, and it does a lot of damage. Look how much damage that one boulder did to that guy. It's crazy. It might not just be because rangers are really strong or anything. Maybe it is simply because a lot of these areas are tuned to be incredibly easy right now. One other thing, when I leveled up to level 5, can you see now that next to my heal skill on the right hand side of my skill bar, I've now got an open slot. I've deliberately not equipped anything in that, so we can have a look at that next episode. But basically that's one new skill I've now unlocked that will always be there no matter what weapon set I'm equipped with, which is great. The weapons only affect the left hand 5 skills on your bar, which is nice. Also, can I just say, right, probably the #1 complaint about Guild Wars 2, okay, right now a lot of people are talking about endgame and saying this is where the game's failing, blah blah blah, everything else is fine. But before the game came out, the #1 thing, hold on, we'll speak to this guy first. Got a minute, he says, I'm in over my head here, I could use some help. Fancy taking down a few harpies or helping out around the dam? What about harpies? They nest on top of the dam. If they stayed there, I'd have no problem, but the stupid buzzards fly down and scare my workers. If you see any harpies, get rid of them. On top of the harpy infestation, we've got small leaks to seal, rock slides to clear, and elementals that pester my workers and need to be driven off. So that's all stuff really that we already know from having been in the area, and that's why I say a lot of the times it doesn't really matter if you miss what the heart guys are talking about. But one thing I do hear as well is, remember we equipped that mining pick from the last personal story episode? Well, I'm actually going to use that here, so watch out for that. I'm going to actually mine some copper ore, which will be nice. But yeah, going back to what I was saying earlier, the #1 complaint about the game before it came out was people saying that they didn't like that you couldn't make builds in Guild Wars 2, and they were really worried there weren't going to be enough skills, and that they just didn't like, or it really threw them off, this idea that your weapon would change the left hand side of your skill bar. I haven't heard any of that since the game's come out, and I really, really like that, because that was like the main thing everyone was going on about for ages. It was a comment that kept cropping up, and I think people were justified in being worried about it. I really do. I don't think I wouldn't blame anyone for being worried about that kind of thing, and I can see where people were coming from. But I just love that this has turned out to actually work so well. I don't think I've seen a single comment on any of my videos, anywhere at all, really, where someone said this has caused the game to fail. Honestly, I think for any faults you might have with this game, which I don't think there are that many. I think endgame is one fault, but it's a big problem to a lot of people that are expecting this game to, they're treating this game as a subscription-based game, which really it's not. But aside from that, I think if there's one thing that I would always defend this game on, is that the combat is just, they did that really well, and the build making as well, with all the traits and stuff, which we'll talk about later as well. I just think it's fantastic. So anyway, with this guy, we've now got over 113 karma from doing all these events. Could get an iron mining pick here. Right now we've only got a copper one, and you're reading the description there, it basically means we can get more valuable materials and things, which is great, but that also has a level 10 requirement to will. Also, we can buy this is what I bought, Dam Debris. These are interesting items that when you double click, they actually give you a temporary weapon in your hand, an environmental weapon. So we actually just got this rock out of nowhere, and if you remember how damaging that previous rock was that we threw, that's why I was tempted to get this one. I was like, this will be good. And we move on to the site of another heart quest here. This is an interesting one. This is to do with lots of drakes and stuff, and I was very confused by it for a long time. Anyway, we throw the rock at this guy and just one hit him, which I think is fantastic. Mike didn't even get a hit in there. Also, you'll notice Mike is leveling up at the same pace as us, which is very nice. So, you know, if I were to get a new pet, you don't actually have to like level another pet up to the same level as you or any of that, like you might have had to have in Guild Wars 1. There's a lot of freedom there this time. They've done a lot of stuff like that to just try and encourage you to piss about and experiment and stuff. So we might have more than 2 pets in the end. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, this heart is very, very easy. I think the balancing slightly changed. But first time I ever did this, as I say, at Eurogamer, you see all these traps here on the left-hand side? I literally ran from trap to trap to trap to trap along this small thing, activated each one, and then I was pretty much done with the quest. I was done with the heart. That was it. It was as simple as that. And as you can see, we're already way over 50% as it stands, and we're doing pretty well. Now, this is another thing you can do with a lot of these hearts. You can open stuff or interact with things that will spawn enemies. So drakes are coming out of these, for example. And then you'll get progress for that, but stuff will actually spawn out of them as well. I don't know what I advise, really. A lot of people will say, oh, you should kill these things, because you can accidentally aggro them onto other people in the area and be a total dick. Or you can just run past and go to interact with more and more things. It's kind of down to you, I suppose. But it's not always going to be faster. For this one, I would certainly say if you just kill the hatchlings as they come, you'll be alright. So once again, I'm like, oh, damn, I've nearly finished the heart. We should go speak to the guy. So let's speak to Travis, a fisher, who says, my brother said this was a dangerous job, but I had no idea it was this bad. Drake hatchlings get caught in crawfish traps constantly, and they sure are mad when you let them out. The scale in the river don't help either. Is there anything I can do, we ask. This is kind of weird, see, it kind of makes it sound like you want to help the drakes. He says, well, you can inspect the crawfish cages in the river and see if anything dangerous crawled inside, and anything you can do to quell the drake and scale population would be a big help. So basically just kill wildlife, which is wonderful. He says, I love me some fish, but I could do with a drake kebab. Drake kebab was an item from Guild Wars 1, which is pretty awesome to see a reference to it here. He says, I love the simple joy of fishing. Problem is, I know drakes are scaring off the best catches, blah, blah, blah. Well, I would deal with the drakes, but I've heard stories about drake broodmothers popping out of the water and devouring everything in sight, supposedly to get revenge. I don't want that kind of rage around here. So this is something interesting as well. One of the big events that can spawn here spawns a really massive drake called the drake broodmother that you actually see in many places around the game to fight, but he doesn't actually spawn as we stand here. But this kid was running around and annoying me earlier, and I thought, oh, why don't I speak to him and see what he's going on? And he says that he's got a quiz. Him and his friends want to test my knowledge on a group of people called Destiny's Edge, and I'd actually never done this event before now. This is literally the first time I ever did this while I was filming this, which was really cool. I thought, I have to go and see this. So instead of finishing the heart, I actually get distracted by this event that this kid's told me is going on. This isn't always happening. The kid will only come to people every now and then. See, look how quickly that scale died. That was ridiculous. And this mower too. So I thought, oh, I've got to get in on this and see how it goes. Now, in a weird way, I think what I did here accidentally worked in our favour. So we're going to be doing a quiz here to do with pretty much the 5 main characters of Guild Wars 2, but I don't want to spoil all of their plots too early. So this was a bit weird for me, but this guy says, if you know a lot about Destiny's Edge, you must know a lot about Logan Thackeray, since he's the bravest. This was the guy we've met. So he says, okay, prove it. Who was Logan in love with? And we get these options: Countess Anise, Kaith, Queen Jenna, Menlo, or Heir Stagalkin. Okay, so each of these are a big character in the Guild Wars universe. Menlo is a man from Guild Wars 1, so that'd be quite interesting to have Logan turn out to be gay, just like Farron I mentioned before. That better not become a bit of a theme of this LP. So there's that, and basically you got to pick which answer it is. The answer is Queen Jenna. He's in love with the Queen. We don't really know that to full extent right now through just the LP, but that's not a massive spoiler. If you'd read the novel, you would have known that already, and that just kind of plays into the story. They never explicitly come out and say that. So that's the answer. These other other characters around there, though, we will get to know in time. They are all quite interesting. But he says, that's right, you're off to a good start. Okay, then, next question. Logan's the captain of what group? The Inquest, the Blood Legion, Materium Crew, Lion Guard, or Seraph? Well, we already know he's the Seraph, so I just skipped through that. That's the Seraph. He says, that's right, good job. Now for the last question. Who was Logan's best friend in Destiny's Edge? Air, Snaff, Zodja, Ritlock, or Kaith? And the answer here is Ritlock. I'm not going to talk too much about why that is or who that is or any of those characters as it stands. But yeah, so that was everything about Logan. Now there are all these other characters and they'll say, oh, let's see how much you know about this person. So I just kind of just browsed them and I thought, how many people are there here? Because originally there were 6 members of this guild that we're talking about here. But now there's only 5 in-game, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. But I thought, oh, okay, so are these people here? And I open a dialogue with all these guys and then close it again. And little do I realise, and now I'm suddenly just figuring it out, if you actually do that, it doesn't let you go back and try other answers. So this literally is an event where if you get it wrong, then you're screwed, and it's not going to give you another chance. So in a weird way, I've now locked myself out of answering questions for any of the other heroes, which I actually think is a good thing, because it means I'm not going to start spoiling stuff about the other heroes too early, a bit prematurely. So we did a bit of a quiz there on Logan, and once again, I'm kind of now forced to do what I did earlier. I've left an event halfway through. You know, I've progressed at about 25% there, and now I've just got to wait until another player comes along and gets questions right for it to actually finish, which is cool. I love events like that, events that you actually have to know stuff and you answer questions. There's a couple around in the Norn areas, but in general there aren't that many in Guild Wars 2, so that was a really nice breath of fresh air and totally new for me. And that's cool, because that's something that was supposed to be good about Guild Wars 2, but it's also shooting itself in the foot right now. That you can go back to earlier areas and see all this new content, it's just people don't realise they can go back, and you never know where the new content is, which kind of sucks. But in any case, we break 2 more eggs, we finish the heart, and we say, can I browse your wares? He says, I'm pretty sure you'd be missing a finger or 2 to those drakes if it wasn't for you. Browse who you like. He'll sell us an egg, which is another consumable item that I don't get, or he'll sell us a scale, which is an accessory that I could equip that gives me even more healing power, just like that food we bought earlier. But oh, actually, I do buy the egg. Do I use the egg? I think I buy it, but I don't use it. Come on, Natalie, are you going to use it? No, okay, alright, well, I guess next episode we'll have a rotten drake egg to play with, so that'll be quite interesting. But there you go, guys, that was me leveling up. I'm now ready to continue with a personal story. We've done this kind of chunk of Queensdale here, this chunk, as I say, which I think existed in Guild Wars 1 at some point during its development, and I will see you tomorrow for more personal story stuff. Let me know how this turned out, if you want to see more episodes like this, live maybe, or as I said before, maybe even cut this out. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, have a good evening, and I'll see you next time.